I do have to ask, because when I first heard that they were making a remake of the Planet of the Apes, I was a little bit like, really, you know, and so when you knew that this was happening, what kind of approach did you go into kind of pitching the film to make sure that it was not going to be, or I don't know, what were other directors pitching at the time that kind of made your pitch a little bit more interesting?
Well, first of all, I mean, the great thing was when I got the script, I realized it wasn't a remake, and it's an origin story, and I personally hate remakes unless they're remakes. I think are valid when you're remaking a bad movie with a good idea, and there are many of those. And so I think that, you know, it is valid. But if you're trying to remake something that is iconic and has already succeeded on so many different levels, for me, there's no point creatively. So this script, when it came in, I read it, and it is an origin story. It's an origin story in the truest sense of the word. It's about an origin of a species. So I read it specifically as that, not necessarily as part of a franchise or even the mythology, the larger mythology around it, the Apes mythology. So, and then as I began to read the script, I began to see that this is a film that can really stand on its own 2 feet, and I think all the best origin stories should be able to do that, because if you're going to try and reboot something, you need to start from a really strong bedrock and not try and build your house on sand and sort of, you know, try and explain things that people already know about. And so we wanted to do something new and interesting and really exciting. But it's a film for me that really attracted me because it has heart. You know, it was always there in the story, and so I went back into the studio once I'd been given the script, and I prepared a whole visual sort of library of how I was going to make this film, and that included clips from other movies and a lot of visual imagery from magazines and books that I'd collected and stuff. So I wanted to show them that, you know, the visual ambition of this movie that was on the page really could be seen in this way, and they saw eye to eye, and they liked what they saw. So I suddenly found myself with the job.
In a way, you almost had to find a partner in crime in finding an actor to play Caesar, and so was Andy always the first choice, and did it take much convincing on his part, and how do you kind of collaborate with somebody who's so great at what he does, and it's such a specialist almost in this motion capture world?
Yeah, I mean, he was the first choice, absolutely, but I honestly at the time wasn't sure we were going to get him. We were very fortunate to get him, and the reason why I thought that was twofold. I thought he was too busy, because he's an extraordinarily busy actor, and also I wasn't entirely sure he wanted to play another ape, and he very quickly, and that wasn't a fear out of any similarities with the other movies, but I just thought his initial gut reaction would be that, and he's one of those actors that actually takes the time to read the scripts he's given. So and a lot of us, you know, if we get a lot of scripts, we don't always have time to read them. So the fact that he did that, and he knew Weta was involved, and he's obviously very close to them, so he really took the time to consider us, and you know, his first reaction was, this is totally unlike anything I've ever done, and it is not King Kong. It is not, you know, it is not just another performance capture part. And I think what people seem to forget is performance capture is really a tool to create a character. There's no similarities just because it's performance capture. So so he came into this with really seeing it as the opportunity to play a character throughout his entire life, basically, from a baby right up to full adulthood. And not only that, but to play it from the point of view of a domestic surrogate son / pet growing up in a household to one that's leading a full-blown revolution. So it's you know, if you think of it in human terms, that's an amazing character to play, and so he jumped in feet first.
To be able to, because the technology is the fact that you was it created for the film where you can kind of shoot in real environments, or and did you help in development of that, or what was that always your kind of note saying we need to shoot this in an environment with, you know, with everybody kind of running around and doing the things that they did in the film?
Yeah, we excuse me, we basically Weta with this film were doing something that they'd never done before, which is they were going on the road, and they were taking all of their technology out of the studio and putting it into the street, basically. And if you think of the history of cinema, it's interesting how cycles repeat themselves, because motion picture filmmaking started off in a Georges Méliès studio, and we were stuck in the middle of the front and middle, you know, the best seat in the house, and then somebody figured out, oh, we can move the camera and we can shoot a close-up, and then, oh, we can move the camera and we can track, and then somebody figured out editing, and then they went outside of the studio onto the street, and in a way performance capture technology is following the same rules as that, and we're now at that stage where you can have a performance capture character, no matter what he is, whether in our case a chimpanzee or a gorilla, excuse me, or an orangutan, actually interacting with a human counterpart, a human character, alongside in the same shot, but in a real-world environment. It's not, doesn't have to be. I think if you think of Avatar, when they left the human environment and went into the alien environment, all of that is a digitally created environment. And the big difference between us and them is that all of our scenes are either locations, physical locations, or physical sets.
Did it definitely help the actors to play these roles, then to watch James kind of interact with Andy and you know, John Lithgow doing those moving scenes that you guys?
Yeah,
it's really nice.
It definitely raises the game. I mean, to have another actor, especially an actor like Andy Serkis or any of our ape actors, in fact, who are all quite extraordinary. They, you know, to be able to play against them, of course, you know, to have that eye contact, to have that chemistry, to have, you know, the pacing of the scene, and being able to play it out in that way, and not having to Roger Rabbit it, which is basically the alternative and the old way of doing things, raises the game of the actor, no doubt. And we had to, you know, in order, because a chimpanzee anatomy is so physically different from a human, once in a while we had to shoot what you call a clean plate, which is when you have to take the ape out of the shot and you have to reshoot with just the human character. And you can noticeably, you know, see how much, you know, the actor misses being able to play against. And so what's great now is that technology allows Weta to very, very rarely have to use those shots, and instead it's always the shots that we had Andy actually in that we can use.
Now, I know you're the director of the film and you've been living with this movie forever. You have to play a favor in this case. Is there a scene when you were shooting you're actually quite excited to see the final product of? Is there one kind of moment where even now you can still be a little bit geeky and be like, yes, this is a great moment, and even it's in your film, but... Yeah,
well... I mean, I'm going to sound obvious when I say this, but I mean, there were so many that going into it, you know, and it was such a scale that I'd never really attempted before. With, you know, we have a whole sequence that takes place across the Golden Gate Bridge, which is an assault on the bridge by 100+ apes, taking on a police force that is essentially trying to block them and stop them getting across. And what one has to remember is our movie is not about necessarily conflict between humans and apes in a continental or global form. It's a story of an uprising in microcosm, and these apes are trying to escape. It's an escape movie. They're trying to get out of our world and into a world that they feel like they belong. And that was massively exciting to be part of that whole scene. But the movie starts very small. You know, it starts very intimate, and it's like the baby in the basket floating down the river, and that river gets larger and larger. So there were scenes which I did between John Lithgow and James Franco, this father-son relationship, and you know, those are very much character study scenes in terms of how he relates to his father, who is, you know, slipping away from him physically and also mentally, and those were great to shoot. But so for me as a filmmaker, it was really kind of lavish in a way to have the opportunity to just, you know, tell very small stories within the scenes and then just work on a huge canvas as well.